Right, today we're going to talk about cinequads, and I'm not saying cine whoops because a cine whoop is one of those toy 75mm whoops with a Cadex turtle, etc. strapped in it. We're talking about proper cinematic FPV quads carrying a Hero 7 or the like, or using Real Steady to create cinematic footage. And below, as you see, here is my own Squirts V2 that I've had for donkeys, and it is broken somewhere, although I can't remember where. Oh yeah, I broke the arm on it. Here is my own Diaton MX Taycan. Here's my Shendrones Nutmeg. And here we have the iFlight Bumblebee, which apparently is an FPV racing drone, except it's not. And I kind of wanted to do this, I'm going to do this video in two parts, because I'm going to review the Taycan, and we'll have a quick look at the frame from the Bumblebee. But I'm doing it in two halves because I think the first half of this video should be very much about the many reasons why you should not buy these or this or this, because these guys are being sort of reviewed and discussed on every channel, but very few people seem to be pointing out the massive flaws that anybody who buys one of these is going to come across. So this first half is going to be a bit of a waffle, and then we'll look at this guy. Right, so whichever of the cinequads you decide to purchase, whether it be the Shendrones or the Diaton or the iFlight, etc., or the French one, which was essentially the birth of both the Diaton and the iFlight, you need to be aware that what you're buying is a very, very niche product. If we take, for instance, the Diaton, this is not a small quad that you will fly in many locations indoors. It weighs more than my Osiris, which is running 2207 motors, and it weighs about 20 grams more. And the Diaton, like all the others, is built around the idea of generally running 20 by 20 components, flight controller and ESC, and then using smallish motors, generally 1407s or 1408s as the Diaton is, or the smaller 1507s as the iFlight BNF version comes with. And they're all running props of roughly 3-inch, although the squirts are slightly different sized. And the idea of all these frames is that they're designed in such a way to enable you to fly slowly and relatively smoothly, in a very flat way, without using lots of roll, and you will tend to sort of use them to yaw into moves. And that plays very nicely into professional or cinematic footage. And if you couple them with, as I said, a Hero 7 using Hypersmooth, or a Hero 6 using Real Steady, or I believe Real Steady are now supporting the Hero 8 as well, you can get amazing smooth, slow footage. But that one good thing comes with a number of really bad ones. As soon as you add ducts onto a quad, you get a lot of bad flight characteristics. So all of these quads will fly worse than any other 3, 4 or 5-inch quad that you can find that's been set up properly. And that's not because they're bad quads, it's just physics. If you take, for instance, the Squirt V2 with its TPU ducts, what will happen is you're flying relatively high, you want to descend, and it's a little bit windy, and basically the wind will get trapped beneath the ducts and the quad will want to flip, or it won't want to descend, and it can be really difficult to bring them down from high points in wind. The ducts also give you odd characteristics. If you're flying close to things, you'll often find that the quad will suck itself into them, and you'll suddenly hear the motors change speed as the flight controller thinks, what the hell is going on here? And you kind of have to learn to sort of power out of that, otherwise you just end up getting sucked into trees or whatever you're going over. And that applies to all of these, although these guys with the carbon and plastic ducts seem to be a little bit better at descending than this guy with its more flappy TPU ducts. And the list of bad characteristics goes on. Any sort of slight gust of wind or anything like that can turn a smoothly flying quad, and suddenly you'll hear it jerk or the motors speed up or anything like that, and it makes the entire experience of flying one of these really imprecise, because you're always aware that at any moment it might start doing odd things, such as I said, sucking you in or flipping out, or any of those characteristics that you will find on badly tuned whoops. Whereas if you take something like this, I can pinpoint this with 100% accuracy in any spots that I want, and the only thing that will let me down is my own skills. This guy, you're always on edge in case it does something that you weren't quite expecting. And as I said, that's not a fault of Diatom or any of the others, that's just simply the nature of the beast. And flying these is, you learn to fly them in different ways. You don't get too close to the ground, because otherwise you'll hit a column of air that has nowhere to go because of the ducts, and you'll sort of struggle. If you're flying towards a tree, you'll generally carry more speed than you would ideally want to do, because it will help you go through that sucky, sticky point as you hit the V of the tree or whatever it might be. And you'll generally find that the people who are masters at this, Nurk and people like that, they'll tend to fly faster and then, if necessary, slow the footage down. In fact, if you watch any of Nurk's videos using his Squirt V2, his videos change speed. One sticks to mind where he's going through a museum. He's changed the speed of his footage at least a dozen times, and he's doing that to basically A, give him obviously a beautiful cinematic video, which he's really good at, but B, to counteract the odd characteristics which these guys experience. So that out of the way, why would you buy one of these? And the reason why you would buy one of these is basically because you're an experienced pilot and you want something to maybe add to your existing FPV footage. Maybe it's B-roll footage, maybe you want to go really close through tree canopies and you want a little bit of extra protection so your props aren't going to get snagged on branches, etc. The one thing that all of these bad things lead to is, and the whole reason for the ducts is because the ducts on the squirts add thrust. So the squirt adds roughly 100 grams of thrust per motor, and it does that by obviously directing a clean column of air vertically downwards, and that of course leads to all the odd effects. But what it also does is lead to a quad which is basically happiest flying at a very shallow angle. In fact, if you try and nose them down to pick up speed, you'll notice that it's almost like flying in angle mode. The quad will want to naturally steady itself out again, and that means that when you're doing those tricky proximity locations, you're not fighting a quad which naturally, if you put its nose down, will want to pick up speed, and you'll keep having to sort of back off that speed to slow it down. So they're all things to take into account. Why have I got them? For the reason that I've got a lot of quads. I love the cinematic stuff, although I very rarely do anything that's worthy of it. And I like the fact that, I can fly very slowly through tree canopies, etc., with very little danger that I'm going to get snagged. But flying at 5 miles per hour through tree canopies is not something for probably 97% of FPV pilots, who would be much happier, as would I, in pretty much all circumstances, flying at 50 or 60 miles per hour with a proper freestyle quad, which is probably pretty much the same price for a good one. So this is really a video to sort of say to anybody who's considering these, your money in this hobby will be much better spent on a normal freestyle quad, whether that be 3, 4 or 5 inch. If you're a very experienced pilot, or you want to get into the world of professional cinematography, working for film companies, doing adverts, all that sort of stuff, these guys are really good platforms. But for you to be able to do that, you'll need to be a damn good pilot before you ever see one of these. What you don't want to do is try to learn to fly on one of these, because while these ducts might look safe, when you're flying these quads with their odd characteristics, which at the drop of a hat can do something slightly unexpected, hitting somebody with 7 mil of foam on a quad that weighs 370 odd grams prior to its battery and hero is going to really bloody hurt. So that out of the way, let's go on to part 2 of this video.